5 signs that you're dating a vulnerable or inverse narcissist. Dude, you are on point with your titles.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
It's a listogram. No, it's a listicle.
A listicle. Oh, you know where I think it sounds like testicle, but it's not. I think it's from article, and then in a list format, it became a listicle.
I see.
Yeah. So last time we had 5 signs. Now we have 5 signs again. You're kind of like on this little 5-sign trend.
I appreciate it, man.
But this is a very interesting one because most of the time when we think of narcissism, we think of grandiose narcissism, right? This is the, I'm awesome.
I'm special. I deserve things, even though I didn't work for it.
Yeah.
But just give it to me.
Yeah, just give it to me. I feel like you're thinking of examples there, and we'll get to that. But you mentioned to me an example of like your students that just expect grades, even though they didn't earn it.
Because I showed up to class, I deserve a B, even though I didn't turn in my assignments.
This is grandiose. So on the other side, we have vulnerable narcissism or inverse narcissism, which is basically feel bad for me. I've had this story. I've had all these negative things happen to me. And in reality, a lot of them are very accurate stories. Like they are tragic stories, but their identity gets formed around it.
Yeah. So it's inverse in the way of like, the person that's grandiose, like I just deserve it because I'm awesome. They're the vulnerable narcissist saying, because of what I went through, this is why I deserve everything and everyone should accommodate me because of the story that I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. Let's get into this because we're going to talk about kind of recognizing it, what it's like in a dating environment, all of it. But first, welcome to 12 Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. My name is Pye.
I'm Dr. Glenn.
Okay, Dr. Glenn. We'll save the newsletter and the other conversation for a little bit into this. I want to get right into the topic. So vulnerable versus grandiose, we kind of understand the differences. One is I'm awesome because, the other is you should serve me because.
Yes. So the first component of a vulnerable narcissist is they have a really jacked up story. Mm-hmm. They went through really tragic circumstances and their whole identity is tied behind that story.
What are some examples of these? Without going into like personal details, but.
Like they went through severe abuse growing up. They were deprived as a kid. They had to work jobs for their parents and make sure that they're okay. So because of the struggle that they went through, now everybody owes me. Mm-hmm. And I deserve it. I deserve it because of I did it. So now people should want to do this for me.
I've had quite a few friends that would fall under the category of vulnerable narcissists. And what's interesting is that you can see in all of them the disorganized attachment style. This kind of like wounded and trying to heal others before taking care of myself. And like, there's a lot of stuff that comes along with it. But each one of them had these similarities where one of them was incredibly poor growing up and just struggled to make ends meet and had to help provide for the family when, he was very young. And at one point came up to me and said, when we were adults, said, you should be my business partner because I deserve it. And I was like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
And it's like, this business that you're creating, you need to bring me into it because I deserve it. And I go, you said the same thing twice. Like, why do you feel like you deserve it? Because I've been through a lot, man. And I didn't know what it was back then because I was in my 20s back then. But as soon as I learned of this concept, I go, holy crap, that is literally a vulnerable narcissist. Everything that was asked upon others, it was literally going back to, well, I need you to take me and do this stuff because you're privileged, man. This is like I don't have those things, so you need to help me. Another case of it, very similar, an upbringing where they're moving around constantly, single family home. The parent that was home mom had her own set of mental health issues, and just constantly a chaotic environment, like growing up. And yeah, their identity is literally that event, to the point where they will go if we look at case studies, they will go to therapists and they will say things like, you can't help me because you don't understand what I've been through. That's the constant theme. You can't help me because you don't know.
Exactly. And you brought up a really excellent point, the disorganized attachment. So the story growing up as a kid is I had to rescue my family, and so now everyone needs to rescue me. And anything short of that, it's not good enough. But I'll be there for you. I'll help you. No, I deserve it, Pye. You need to take me in because I deserve it. Anything less than that, you're being a dick.
The crazy part about this, and I feel like the reason why this is so difficult to, I don't want to say it's super difficult to detect, because honestly, when you know the signs of it, it is pretty easy to see. But it can, when it's compared to, like, anybody knows a grandiose narcissist, like, you can identify them, you can see them coming a mile away, right? Usually, unless they're, good at hiding it. But when it comes to inverse narcissism, a lot of these people will have tendencies to want to help and to serve others. So they'll look and identify the people that they think are worse off than them. And they'll really make it an effort to, like, I'm gonna spend time in their lives, because really what they're doing is avoiding their own personal work, right? They're avoiding the things that would help them to grow. So they'll go and they'll spend their time doing all these different things. And so it looks like the person is very altruistic until you have a problem with them, until you want to discuss something that matters, and then it goes back to, well, you need to understand where I come from. You need to understand this, right?
Yeah, the tone changes really quickly. And on a date, like, what happens when you first go on a date? You get to know them. It's kind of superficial. You're setting boundaries. Usually that person will be like, oh, so tell me your story. And, oh, I grew up in...
Exactly.
I think, oh, what about yours? Oh, let me break it down for you. And then they just go straight in. And they tell you the sad story. And most people are very kind. And they're like, oh my God, that's horrible. How'd you survive that? And that whole time is spent talking about the pain and the struggle that this person went through. There's a conviction when they're sharing their story. And you're like, oh, this person's amazing. This person's a vulnerable narcissist.
Yeah. I love that you said that, though, because one of the things that we hear a lot from the other side, like dating. So when you're dating a vulnerable narcissist, one of the things that we hear quite often is that initially the vulnerable narcissist will be one of the best listeners that the person has ever talked to. They'll feel like, oh my gosh, when I have their attention, they're just fully dialed in. And what they're waiting for is they're waiting for the opportunity to share their story. And so you create, usually in these relationships, you create a very early trauma bond where both of you have gotten into really deep conversations, deep things fast. The other person has listened to everything that you want to share, and then they share their story, and you feel so connected. And then you go to these, oh man, this is so incredible. This is euphoric. This is the one. When in reality, it's a full-on trauma bond with a vulnerable narcissist.
Yeah, and then the person that's a narcissist is like, my story is worse than yours. And let's make that clear. I'm special because, yeah, what you went through, it's bad, but it's not as bad as mine.
Well, I feel like those typically come out later. At the beginning of these relationships, at the beginning of dating the vulnerable narcissist, I think that is all there is just understanding. I understand.
Yes.
I understand what you've been through because I've been through crazy stuff too.
Yes.
I understand.
Yeah. So at the beginning, you're right. It's at that level. Like, yeah, are you okay? This is incredible. But yeah, as it starts to go down, it's not as bad as mine. Yeah,
you're living together, and it's like, hey, I don't understand why you leave all this work for me to do, or why aren't you getting this thing done? And then you got to understand that my upbringing is not like yours.
Yeah, there's always that story. It becomes a comparative. Like anything that happens, like, hey, you gonna do the dishes? Well, no. Well, why not? I just didn't have time. Well, why can't you? Do you know my upbringing, man? Do you know what I went through in life? It's nothing compared to yours. Mine was worse. And then they use that as a constant argument to constantly one up you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many dynamics we can identify like this, but I feel like one that is it's a fairly common pattern is the person that's in an unhealthy relationship finds a vulnerable narcissist who basically listens to the story. So like the person that's in an unhealthy relationship, they don't know what to do. They can't, figure things out. They don't know how to approach the problem directly, whatever it might be, right? They're dealing with that thing, right? But then they find this vulnerable narcissist who kind of first looks like a friend. And at first they're just kind of hanging out. And this friend is just listening to everything, understanding, then sharing their own story and their own stuff. And before you know it, it's an emotional affair. And then, soon after that, it's an actual affair. And it isn't until way down the road, 6 months, 12 months, a year plus down the road, where the other person recognizes, oh my goodness, this other person is very unhealthy. I'm very unhealthy, but this other person's also very unhealthy. And it's wild to see how often it happens.
Yeah, I mean, and then in that example, I mean, the one that you're providing, usually the other person is making all the accommodations for that other person.
Correct. The vulnerable narcissist is making all the accommodations, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think at the beginning, like they'll support, but ultimately I think it's the other person that's making the accommodations for the narcissist.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like it shifts.
Yeah,
There's a point in it where it shifts, basically, where at the beginning, to win the relationship, it's the vulnerable narcissist that's kind of like doing all of it, right?
Yeah.
Then it sort of shifts and flips to the other side, where the other person is now.
Yeah. Like they're sucking you in, like, oh my God, you're pain. Oh my God, you're so amazing, to, well, you're not as amazing as me. And let me tell you why. And all the attention and focus is on this person. You're going to cater to all of my needs.
Yeah.
When I want it, now.
And I think it feels as though, and I don't know if there's any studies on this, you can speak to this point, but from a pattern standpoint, it feels like those that are in unhealthy relationships are particularly vulnerable to inverse narcissism, because an inverse narcissist is looking for opportunities to, like, where can I find someone that wants to listen to my story, who needs someone to rely on, who needs support. I don't think they think of it this way naturally. I think it just plays it out this way because, well, this is a person who has all these problems. They're stuck in a relationship. And this is a person who's willing to listen and to be there because they're super unhealthy and they want someone to be able to draw on, to rely on. So they kind of naturally fit together.
Yeah. So similarly, like with the grandiose narcissist, they're so into themselves and there's like a hyper confidence, right? And then so usually the person that's kind of the people pleaser, they're drawn to that confidence. Like, oh my God, I want to be more confident too, right? So using that analogy with the inverse narcissist, it's more about like, they're so honest about their pain and their struggles, and they're able to freely share what they went through in their life. And it's so amazing. So that's what draws you to that person because you're identified in your own pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they're able to express it in a way where you feel like, oh, okay, yeah, I should be able to do that too.
Yeah, the inverse narcissist that I've seen throughout my own life, as well as throughout case studies, they've always been very eloquent, good communicators.
Yes.
Like they're charming. They can have, a great stimulating conversation, make you feel like
they're emotionally available. Just similar to the grandiose. There's a lot of similar characteristics.
Very similar.
And but the intention is you're going to support me because of what I went through, and that's going to be the basis of why you're going to accommodate and treat me special.
Well, and so speaking of those similarities, right, we have the expectation of once we're into the relationship, it becomes a one-way relationship.
Yes.
You serve me.
Yes.
They'll lure you in of this, with whatever, and then so both narcissists will kind of do the exact same thing. They're controlling and manipulative, but in different ways, right?
Yeah, because they'll use the argument. I remember like in one of our groups, like one person was sharing about how they had a friend, and then they would, they would talk about their pains, and then finally the friend would be like, "Well, your pain isn't as bad as mine. Mm-hmm. You're an immigrant, and you don't know. Were you tortured this way? Did your family treat you this way? Did they do this to you?" And it becomes this argument, and then the other person felt like, "Oh, okay, I need to shut up," and then that person, remember, they're like, "Oh, I feel guilty. I shouldn't even share my pain to you. I should just listen to you." That's what the inverse narcissist does, right? They use that. It's like this kind of, it's not so subtle, but it is kind of subtle compared to the grandiose narcissist of, dude, how could you not want to pay? How could you not want to listen to me? My pain is worse than yours. How could you not want to just be there for me and drop everything for me? Because, dude, you know what I went through. That's really selfish of you, right? So it's done in this more subtle way, but yet they're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I almost feel like our current social media environment is sort of rewarding inverse narcissism, like this, my plight is worse than yours type thing. My story is this, and this story is worse than yours. And then other people are like standing up to like back it, like, yeah, she's had it much worse, or he's had it more difficult. You should be understanding. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's really strange. I mean, this is the thing. It's not saying like, You shouldn't tell your story, or you shouldn't be proud of the struggles you went through. But if it becomes like you mentioned earlier, like you go to therapy and you're like, you can't help me. You're just going to listen to me because no one can fix my problems. Like you're too tied to that story, and you're just expecting special treatment versus I went through this, but I also want to be a better person. I want to change. I want to improve my relationships. I want to make my life better for the people around me. That is the shift versus no, I went through this crap and now everybody better take care of me, because anything less than that, that's crap.
Yeah. So another similarity to this is like between grandiose versus vulnerable is they're going to both suck you dry emotionally.
They're going to suck you dry emotionally.
And they take very, very easily.
Yeah, like they just feel like everything should be given to them. So this is the other commonality. You give them gifts, you just spend time with them. Okay, yeah, that's what you should do.
Now, one of the big differences in terms of patterns kind of comes across with this next point. So like we had number 3 is they're both thoughtless and sensitive at the same time. They can be extremely thoughtless, but also be extremely sensitive. This is where there's a difference between, because usually we would never, really talk about someone with grandiose narcissism as being sensitive and thoughtful of others, right? But the vulnerable narcissist can go back and forth between these two things.
Yeah, so I could be like, why? I could be attacking you, like, why aren't you there for me? What the hell's wrong with you? You're such an a-hole, such a jerk. And then you're like, how can you say that? Why are you doing this to me? How can you be so cruel? How can you say that to me after you know everything that I've been through, right? So it just goes on this like all or nothing lens where it goes from like attack, but then I'm not taking accountability for the fact that I'm saying really mean things to you. And now I'm just in this wounded space. You have hurt me. You have taken me to the point that I can't believe you did that to me. Mm-hmm. How could you be so cruel? Right? And it goes back and forth.
I've also had moments where, in speaking with a vulnerable narcissist, when you point out to them what they're doing, they become extremely aware of it. So like when you say, hey, have you recognized that in the course of the last 2 years, the only time that you've ever talked to this other person was to get support for your own thing? Like yes. you've never asked that person how they're doing. You've only used in that relationship. And then suddenly they go, you're right. Oh my gosh, I've been a really bad friend to that person. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even. But then the next session, it's back to what it was.
Yeah, which is, well, yeah, but look at what I've been through. How this person should want to be there for me.
Yeah.
And then there'll be a lack of an awareness. They'll be like, but I'm so easy to get along with. I'm so easy to support. Why can't you understand that? Why wouldn't you want to support me? Because it's so easy to do. But then they don't recognize that you're insulting them. You're expecting a lot. You're demanding. You're not providing any support. There's no self-awareness of you're not that easy to deal with.
That's where I feel like there's a big differentiation between the grandiose versus the vulnerable narcissist when it comes to like dealing with them. Because if we're talking about like a dating environment, right? When you're dating a grandiose narcissist and you say something like, I just don't feel like you're being sensitive to what I'm saying and to my needs. They'll say something like, I just think you're too sensitive. Like you need to not care so much.
Yeah.
It goes that direction, right?
Right.
And it's very much like brushing off of everything else. They can't even see or empathize with what it is that's being said. On the vulnerable narcissist side, it will look as though they do understand. You tell them. You say like, look, I just don't feel like you're seeing it from this angle. And this hurts when you do that. They'll go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're right. I didn't see it that way. And now that you pointed out, I can't believe that I did that. I'm so sorry. And I'll change this. And then the next day, the next week, they will do the exact same thing again and forget as if the conversation had ever happened. And when you bring it up, like this is a recurring theme, we keep going back to this place. Then it's, you need to understand why.
Yes.
You need to understand that this is my background. This is who I am.
They go back to that story of this is why I'm doing this. There's temporary moments of like, okay, I see it, but then it just goes away just like that. And it's like back to my story.
And that's what makes it so much more kind of sinister, because the vulnerable narcissist can make you think as though they are seeing and changing and understanding, but they don't. In the same way as the narcissist does, they don't understand, they don't empathize, and their own life, their own story is the only thing that matters, but just in a little bit of a different way, right?
Yeah. And then this is the thing with the vulnerable narcissist. They do it with the people that are closest to them, right? So then they may have like distant, healthier relationships on the surface. So it doesn't look that way. But to the people that are closest to them, it's a miserable existence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the crazy aspect about it is that oftentimes the people that are not as close don't even understand the problem. They don't even see the
like,
problem.
This person isn't that way. Like this person is an angel.
They're really sweet.
They just have a lot of pain. Why can't you understand? And then that person will no. And then you try to explain. You're just not understanding. You're not Pye. You're just being insensitive, man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and then it kind of messes with the person that is like in this space
Mm-hmm.
when actually they're actually seeing it correctly.
Okay. Number 4. Inverse narcissists love to triangulate.
Yeah. So triangulation is when a 2-person problem becomes a 3-person or 4-person problem, right? So instead of, hey, Pye, I have an issue with you. Last week we had a discussion. Can we talk it out? It becomes, hey, Anthony, you know what happened with me and Pye last week? Don't tell him though. But this is what took place, okay? Shh. All right. Go to the other person downstairs, you know. Hey, Viet, do you know what happened with me and Pye last week? Shh, don't say anything. And then don't tell Anthony either, okay? Because I let him know, but shh, right? Triangulation all over, right? And then in that example, I'm doing things at a distance. I'm telling a story. Maybe they'll believe like, oh, that's messed up, man. You're really healthy because I'm telling my version. And then how are they going to feel toward you?
Yeah.
It creates tension and it causes chaos and it makes things worse. And it just, anything can explode and everything is chaotic with this person.
Yeah, it gives them that sensation of power, right? Like they're controlling the relationships and that they have that sense of importance. And it's a very interesting behavior, but I find that it's so common among vulnerable narcissists. Like to the point of you would never even think that that's a possibility. I had one particular case where a vulnerable narcissist wanted to help mediate between the woman that he was having an affair with and her husband because it was not a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm going, what? Yeah. Like you're having an affair with his wife and you want to step in and
be the mediator
and be the person to help them separate amicably?
Because I know what to do.
Yes.
I know the pain and I know the struggle. It makes no damn sense.
They insert themselves into these, 3-way dynamics, 4-way dynamics. And again, it's all a diversion. Everything that they're doing is a diversion from actually recognizing what they need to be doing, who they should be working on.
Which is themselves.
Correct.
Yeah. That's a really great example. That's a crazy ass example, but that's a really
Isn't it wild?
example.
But it's not even like, it's not even a one-time thing. It's like you can see it where they'll just insert themselves into these incredibly chaotic situations. And from the other side, I remember one particular case where like this person had gotten involved with an inverse narcissist and they were in the divorce process, so they already knew they were separating and going their separate ways. But this relationship began in the middle of that process. And so I asked him, I said, right now, I understand the feelings that you have, the love, all of that you feel right now, that makes complete sense based on where you're at. Okay. But let me just say this. If you were in a healthy space, would you go and create a relationship with another woman who was married, getting divorced, and has 2 children? And he goes, no, I would never do that.
No.
And then I didn't even have to say anything else. He goes, oh, holy shit. And it was like, suddenly you become awakened to the fact that this other person that's coming in is in a very unhealthy place as well. They might put themselves, and a vulnerable narcissist will be very good about that because they'll have all the words, the language, the communication, be able to say how much work they've done and the personal work and all this, and this is my messed up background. They'll almost appear healthy, like they're there to help, until you're alone with them 12 months down the road, and now it flip-flops, and now it's another relationship that is solely going to be maintained by the one that's healthy or more healthy.
Exactly. And other people do not see.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 5. I want you to explain this one. You said that an inverse narcissist, their treatment of people is also inverse. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So like a healthy person, if you're a healthy person, you're going to treat the people that you love the best. And then exponentially, as you create friendships, it's going to exponentially go out. So who you are as a person pretty much stays the same in terms of your value sets and who you are. And it just extends out, right? People that are dysfunctional, it goes in reverse. They treat the people that are the most intimate in their lives the worst. And then outwardly, the less you know them, the better they treat people. So they treat strangers. That's why you hear stories like celebrities, like, you know, they'll treat their spouses like crap, but then strangers will be like, oh, this person gave me $1,000 and they listened to my story and they were so gracious and kind. That's a sign of a very dysfunctional person. And inverse narcissists, they do the same thing, right? So they tell their stories at a distance, people support them and they have healthy dynamics that take place. They triangulate. And so on the surface, these surface relationships, they look somewhat healthy and it validates their story. But then on the intimate side, these relationships are a hot mess, right? And on a personal level, like even like the family members that I see and dealing with their own parents, like mine, or like have other, you know, cousins, and they tell stories and then people would always be like, the aunt isn't that way. I haven't seen her do that. Or he's not this way, versus like, yeah, there's a distance, but at the core, this person is having struggles. And so it was understanding that dynamic and giving the validation, like, yes, I could see what you're going through.
Yeah. That is, again, another aspect of it that makes it so sinister, because nobody else can.
And people are so surprised. And then there was a point of like, you know, their family, like, that no one else needs to understand. You just need to understand.
Yeah, that can be so confusing. It takes a lot of, man, when you speak to somebody that has lived with a vulnerable narcissist, that person is usually so beaten down and they might have spent years not only serving this person, but tending to that person's emotional needs and everything that so much so that they've suppressed everything about themselves. They don't feel confident anymore. They don't feel, and so to get that person to wake up, to recognize that you're literally living with a vampire. This person is sucking you dry, but nobody else sees it. And you have to be confident enough to know what's happening, because everybody around you is going to question it. And when you say like, it's over, when you say, I can't do this anymore, the people around you are going to say things like, what do you mean?
What's wrong with you?
Yeah,
you're crazy.
They're so kind and they're so
not
nice.
That way. They're not that way. Yeah.
And it's difficult, because it's that place where you have to literally say, no, you don't understand what's happening, and stick to what you know is happening. But so often it goes the other way, where the people around them convince that person that they're the one that is making the wrong decision.
Yeah, because of the triangulating and the manipulation. So it all stacks up. And you're right. Like ultimately, instead of like, you know, I don't care. It's not even like, I appreciate your perspective. It's, I don't care. I don't care. You don't understand. I'm going to do what I need to do.
Yeah. For the people, the relationships that can't understand your decision, it's being okay to let them go. Like that has to be, because the other option is to stay, which is dangerous on multiple levels. This can lead to abuse. This can lead to suicide. This can lead to, you know, deep depressions. Yes. It can lead to so much mental health issues. In addition to just a shorter lifespan. People that live in these types of environments, you will die 10, 20 years quicker.
Yeah, because it's so unhealthy and it's so toxic and chaotic. And if you're that person that's going through that experience and you're not getting validation, you need to understand for yourself, like people may have good intentions, but they don't know.
No.
And they have no idea, and they're not in the space to make that decision. You are.
Yeah. And if they had a clear picture, anyone that cared about you would say, you need to get out. Like if they had, so it's important to understand that they want the best for you, but they just don't know. Most of the time, I would say.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the people around you want the best for you, but they don't understand. They don't understand it. They can only understand from the glimpses that they might have seen. And those are, you know, they'll say, oh, this is just your side of it. You know, what is their side of it? And they'll try to be impartial, but it's not helpful in these types of situations.
Yeah. And this is where differentiation, I think it was our last topic. You have to have really high differentiation and say, I'm going to be my own individual. I know what I'm going through. I need to make a healthy decision for myself.
Yeah. Okay, we made it all the way to the end of the episode, and I totally forgot to talk about the newsletter and the secret to healthy relationships. This is why it's easier at the beginning, but like, you know, we just want to get into things. Anyway, for those of you that are new to the platform, we have an awesome newsletter. You guys can sign up. If you're on YouTube, we'll provide the links to both the newsletter as well as the free guide in the YouTube links. Otherwise, go to 12weekrelationships.com. If you go to / the secrets guide, or if you're on our Instagram, you can find the link right there in our bio. It'll take you to a free download. It's the secret to healthy relationships. We've gotten a lot of questions on like, what are my core values? How do I understand? This guide is something that we wrote from the ground up to give you, well, it's a complete workbook that will help you to understand what it is that you value. It's not a substitute for our 12-week programs, but it gives you a glimpse into our process, our frameworks, and your own values. So it's an awesome guide. In the meantime, sign up for the newsletter as well. We provide weekly tips and insights, and those are handwritten by us. Well, usually by me, because you're in session.
Yeah, but they're personal and they're really well written.
Yeah, we don't spam. We don't do any of that kind of stuff. And in the meantime, well, if you guys would like, jump onto iTunes, leave the podcast a review. We'd love that.
5-star reviews are nice.
That'd be awesome. You know, but I guess it's fair if on the flip side, they're not getting value from us, then they give us something lower, but
and they can DM us too, right?
Yeah. But we do feel like we deserve.
I think so.
Good stars.
And we're not trying to be narcissist about it either. We deserve it, all right?
We've had a really difficult time filming this episode, so please.
We deserve it.
Give us 5 stars, please. All right. That's it for us. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.